Hello, and thank you for being here today. I'm honored to serve as the president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and I am honored to introduce our next speaker this afternoon. Governor John Hickenlooper from the great state of Colorado is restoring faith in good government and has led his state so successfully that even in a tough election cycle for Democrats, the voters of his state have reelected him to a second term. You can applaud that. As an outspoken progressive leader, he has demonstrated an ability to take strong progressive actions, like standing up to the NRA, while maintaining the respect and the support of the people. As the governor of an important swing state, he has faced difficult challenges. He has made courageous decisions that help the people of his state, and he has remained true to his progressive values. We're proud of him for that. And Governor, we're proud of your leadership in so many ways, and we're proud to have you with us today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Governor John Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Ted, for the kind introduction. I want to thank your attendant for inviting me to be here. And as you all just heard, I just got through this little re-election process, which I think was illustrative for a couple reasons. And I think you can view it through a lens that gives some optimism for where we might be headed in this nation's elections, and not just because I won. I think that the lessons that we learned and where it's going are going to have a broader context than just Colorado. But before I talk about that, I want to lay out just a short bit about when I was growing up, about a friend of my mother's. My father, when I was a kid, I was the youngest of four. My father had intestinal cancer and he died just when I turned 8. But the last 6 or 8 months, he had a lot of infections, and so every night, my mother, who was an invariably optimistic person and very positive person, would have to roll him over halfway on his side and take out the sweaty sheets. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, and then roll him back on the clean sheet, and then take out the other side of the dirty sheets. And she changed the sheets about twice a night, and it was a difficult time, obviously. And one of her great friends was a woman named Agnes Nixon, who still lives outside Philadelphia, and she created As the World Turns and The Guiding Light and All My Children, a bunch of soap operas. But she was also someone who just did what could be done and was always positive. And she, unbidden, surprised my mother with a gift of a linen service, so that every day someone delivered 3 sets of sheets, so that my mother wasn't constantly on top of everything else, making sure that she had clean sheets. And I think that Agnes saw my mother spending that time, how much time she was giving to the cleaning of sheets. My mother always said that was the greatest gift anyone ever gave her, and it wasn't something she even knew she wanted, but it was something that just made a lot. So now, hold that thought. Colorado, almost exactly evenly divided between Democrats, Republicans, and independents. The diverse electorate has a diversity of opinion on almost everything. And in our first 4 years, we pretty much went through the whole gamut. We passed universal background checks, limited the size of magazines to 15 rounds or less. We recognized civil unions and moved towards same-sex marriage. Passed an asset bill to make sure that all kids, regardless of immigration status, could get in-state tuition. We had a public safety bill that made sure that all immigrants could get a driver's license regardless of documentation. We implemented a statewide program, all 29 clinics, that made IUDs and other long-acting reversible contraception available, either free or very low cost. In the process of that, reduced teenage pregnancy by over 40% across the state, and reduced abortion in that same population by 35%. We overhauled the state's prison system so that when we came in, almost 1,500 people were in solitary confinement, what they called administrative segregation. In many cases, that was really just a disciplinary. It was just easier for the prison to operate that way. We got that down to 1,500 to 200, made sure that there were, instead of a couple hundred people with mental health issues, I think there were at one point up to 500 or 600, but got that down to 0, made sure people weren't released directly from administrative segregation back into the community, and dramatically increased the resources we put towards teaching inmates job skills to reduce recidivism. We passed legislation based on supporting the growth of renewable energies, and this was in rural Colorado where there's a lot of conflict about climate change and the causes, and it was certainly not wildly popular in many parts of the many rural parts of the state. We enacted the country's first and strictest regulations on the oil and gas industry around methane gas capture and fugitive emissions. We had one of the earliest states to have a frac fluid disclosure rule. But we also rebutted the non-scientific attacks on fracking and defended oil and gas leases as private property. So you could say that we really just about pissed off everyone a little bit. Along the way, we also helped lead the state out of the recession. We did a lot of statewide jobs work. We took a $1 billion deficit into a $650 million surplus, lowered unemployment from 9.1 to 4.7%, and had a couple of the national magazines refer to us as the #1 fastest growing economy. But it was a good thing we had some positive things like that crossed the political spectrum. Our opponents spent tens of millions of dollars during the campaign attacking every aspect of that record that could be remotely translated into a negative ad. And through that all, we ran a strictly positive campaign. We never did a negative ad at once. Now, other outside parties came in and did some attacks on our behalf, but we stayed positive in every public appearance and in every ad. And I think it was a promise I made 14 years ago when I first ran for mayor. So, I never ran for student council or class president, but we could see clearly even back then that that these attack ads really, especially after the election, make it very hard for people to come back together again. They work, and the story I always tell, you never see Coke do an attack ad against Pepsi, because it would work. Pepsi sales would go down, Pepsi would have no choice. They'd do an attack ad against Coke, Coke would attack Pepsi, Pepsi would attack Coke. You'd depress the entire product category of soft drinks. Mayor Bloomberg would say that's probably not a bad thing. But what we're doing is we're depressing the product category of democracy, and especially young people. They're turning off the news, they're not reading policy issues in depth. And I think when I ran for mayor twice and now twice as governor, we really focused on running a positive campaign and talking about it. And in the end, we got more votes than any other statewide, than any candidate in Colorado. People made a lot of stories about how we were so close, and Cory Gardner beat Mark Udall so early in the race. Well, in the end, we got a lot more, I forget, 40,000 more votes than Cory Gardner did. And I think that positive ad approach really had a lot to do with it. We won majorities of the Latino vote, we won a significant majority with the women's vote, with the youth vote. And while many states saw a decrease in turnout this election because of all the negativity, Colorado, we saw total votes cast up almost 10%. We went from just to about 1.82, I think, 1.82 million to a little bit over 2 million votes. And I think that is encouraging, that when we talk in positive sentences and positive images, we can still motivate people to vote. And some of those people that, especially young people that historically hadn't voted as much. Think back now to my mother and her friend Agnes Nixon, and that willingness to be positive, even in the face of real difficult times. I think that applies now as much as it ever has, and probably more so, that we have to take that tone and take action, whether it's legislative or executive, to really begin to deliver a lot of what we promised in terms of a progressive agenda, to take action, providing a service to your neighbors like a linen service, but also making sure that families can do can plan when they're going to have children, that make sure that communities and neighborhoods are getting clean air and clean water that they're entitled to, that we avoid toxicity that has become all too common in campaigns, and that I think if we strive for good government, that and communicate that positively, therein lies a strong path to victory, not for any one candidate or even any party, but really for democracy in our future. Thank you. He didn't think I was going to be that fast.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Governor. We have a few moments for any questions that you may have of the governor. It's a little difficult to see when you're up here with the bright light in your eyes. Are there any?
It's like when my brother told me. Go ahead.
Here's a question right over here. Can we get the mic?
I have a big voice. That helps.
There's the mic right there.
Tell us about the House and Senate party breakdown in Colorado, when you were able to get all of that done.
So our first 2 years was split. The House was Republican, the Senate was Democrat. Both had several vote margins. A lot of that was passed in our third year, which was we had both houses. But that did not in any way diminish the outcries from when you were doing gun safety. When you go down this list, they all got a lot of media attention. So let's say that the public was fully informed, that not everyone agreed this was the right direction.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, we have the mic over here, please. Oh, here we go, right over here.
That other question, the other thing is that almost all those bills, not all of them, but almost all those bills passed with some bipartisanship, the gun bills being the exception.
Maybe your remarks should be more about that. How did you do that?
Well, I tell you that we did go back, and this is interesting, we researched universal background checks or background checks in Colorado. We were getting to about half the gun purchases. And in 2012, we went back and looked if all of our Republican friends were saying, well, crooks aren't stupid. They're not going to get a background check. Why do the rest of us have to pay $10, wait around? And in 2012, just getting to half the gun purchases, we had 38 people convicted of homicide who tried to buy a gun, and we stopped them. 133 people convicted of sexual assault, and we stopped them. 620 burglars, 1,380 people convicted of felony assault, where someone generally goes to the hospital, tried to buy a gun, and we stopped them. We had 420 people who had a judicial restraining order not to see their ex-boss or their ex-spouse. They tried to buy a gun, and we stopped them. And just in case, you can tell I just came off a campaign. I can rattle these numbers off.
It's good.
But just in case you don't think crooks are that stupid, 236 people, when they came to pick up their new gun, we arrested them for an outstanding warrant for a crime.
Impressive statistics, and I think that's a message that could be relevant to a lot of states who are considering the merits of background checks. Question right over here.
Yeah, I'm Ellen Alberding with the Joyce Foundation, and I wanted to ask you about background checks and how you got things through. You just answered that question, so instead, I just want to thank you very much for your courage on this issue. I think it deserves a round of applause from this whole
Absolutely.
group.
Well, let's give the governor another, I'm sorry, our time is up for the questions, but the governor may be able to answer your question if you see him in the hallway before he leaves. But thank you so much, Governor, for coming.
Thank you all.